Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to discuss Resident Evil 8 Village. I know the game has been out for about 2 weeks now, and while I'll try to keep this review, if you want to call it that, spoiler free, I just wanted to get my thoughts out there and let you guys know, as a Resident Evil fan, what I thought of the game. So overall, I'd have to say I enjoyed Resident Evil 8. I thought that there was a lot of new things that they went in different directions with. Just to name a few things that are kind of basic, but instead of having these more closed indoor style levels in Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, in most of the franchise, they tended to go more open with the levels, which was different, but I thought it was a bit more open, I guess, and non-extravagant. It didn't seem like that they wanted really anyone to go out of their way to explore unless they felt the need to, and when they did, it was kind of very basic. Whereas if you have an indoor level such as Castle Dimitrescu in the game, or the police station in Resident Evil 2, you're going to have a lot of nooks and crannies that you kind of want to search and make sure you're finding everything. Whereas out in an open field, it's just kind of takes away from the tension of searching every place. So that was unfortunately one of the problems that this game had. It's not a full setback for the game, but generally speaking, I kind of wish we had more of the Castle Dimitrescu appeal that we got from the trailers. In terms of characterization, I thought the characterization was excellent in this game. Chris Redfield's back. Obviously, if you played the Not a Hero DLC from Resident Evil 7, you'll know that this is kind of a follow-up. Resident Evil 8 is, and he plays a bigger role in Ethan's life. You're still playing as the protagonist, Ethan Winters. It opens up with you and Mia, taking care of your child one night, and Chris pops in, shoots Mia in the head, and basically takes your kid away. And when you wake up and come to after being knocked out and kidnapped, you're in the middle of nowhere, and I think it's Romania or some part of Europe, and you just have to navigate through this creepy old village and this creepy old castle, and figure out what's happened to your daughter, where Mia is, and try to find the answers. One thing I'd have to say is that while the characters are really well done, there is sort of a lore mix-up in terms of how this game approaches its story. It's very much a game that follows up Resident Evil 7, and specifically Resident Evil 7 only. This unfortunately doesn't extend very much into the wider Resident Evil mythos and franchise, I guess. There's definitely nods and big revelations made throughout files and diaries that you can find just throughout the game, but in terms of actual story-driven plot points that relate to the bigger world of Resident Evil, there's not much of that here. This very much stays on task of following up the Winters storyline, and I don't mind that, as I really love Ethan Winters as a protagonist, but I did want more of that kind of bigger appeal, wider approach. In the Not a Hero DLC with Chris Redfield, and even at the end of Resident Evil 7, we got a look and saw that blue shield, a part of the BSAA, is intact and ready to go. What are the answers to that? We don't really get that here. We see them in action, but we don't really get that here. And I kind of wish that we had more of that wider answers to the universe as a whole, rather than just specifically Resident Evil 7. Another thing I wanted to go into was the castle sequence. I thought the castle, Dimitrescu, which houses Lady Dimitrescu and her 3 daughters, I thought it was a great location and just a classic throwback, obviously, to Resident Evil 2's Raccoon City Police Department, as well as some of the closer indoor manners of Resident Evil 4. And while this whole game echoes a lot of similarities to Resident Evil 4, I thought that the castle kind of brought its own unique personality to this game. The only unfortunate thing is that about the first 3 hours of your first playthrough take place in the castle. After that, you never go back to the castle, and it's kind of sad because that really is the most appealing environment in this game. And even on succinct playthroughs, you're going to find out that you can finish the castle part in about 40 to 45 minutes on your third playthrough or so. So it's one of those things where as much as I love the castle, and I'll always stand up for the castle part in this game, it's just way too short. And by, extent, Lady Dimitrescu and her 3 daughters, that whole, sequence is very short in general. And I really wish we had gotten more of that. Capcom used them on the promotion as much as they could, and they're very much just a cog in a wider clock, so to speak. And you end up getting the sense of that after you leave their castle, and unfortunately that's kind of where the game puts you at a fork in the road. You either continue down towards a game that you see coming, you know what the story and how the gameplay is going to be for the next few hours, and it's kind of, do you persevere and go through it, or are you just kind of bored now that the best part is done, which was at the beginning. And I do stand by that. I think the best parts of the game are within the first 3 to 4 hours of the game. After that, there's very little that kept me attached and wanting more. Essentially, what Resident Evil 8 is a boss gauntlet. You have about an hour in between each bosses to complete objectives, figure out puzzles, but it becomes a boss gauntlet for the 4 lords of Mother Miranda, and then Mother Miranda herself. And so you go through Castle Dimitrescu first with the big tall vampire lady, Lady Dimitrescu. Next up is Dr. Salvatore Moreau, and you go through the windmill / sluice gate part, that's kind of how I would call it, and he's essentially a giant fish guy. Before him, though, I should say, you do go to House Benevito, which is probably the scariest sequence in the game, and it's terrific, a great sequence in House Benevito, but everything just slows down from there because that's such a quick mission, while as in comparison everything is pretty slow. It just seems like if you're going for scares in this game, that's great, but the scare sequence is only going to last 15 minutes. Compared to, an hour of gameplay for others. Nothing compares, however, to the factory level of Heisenberg. And he is the 4th Lord, and by the time you get to his factory, you are already so tired of what you played, the game just slows down. And I do mean that in the sincerest sense. I don't mind some of the creatures that are used there. There's definitely a lot more creature and character model variation with the factory than there is in a lot of the rest of the game, but generally speaking, the factory level is just absolutely just dragging and just a slog to get through, and they even make references to that through the dialogue that Ethan says, and it's just, you completely feel that it takes forever to get through the ending of the game just to beat Heisenberg, and then it cuts away from Ethan's story so that you play a mission with Chris, only to come back in the final mission as Ethan. It seemed like they were trying to stuff a lot in at the end, and I think they would have benefited from sort of condensing the material that they wanted to show us and then giving it to us in pieces, rather than these giant bulks that just end up not really confirming anyone's, fun anymore. In fact, it kind of negates the whole point of playing the game. If you're not enjoying it, why continue, right? Anyways, some of the other things that I really did enjoy, though, were the cutscenes. I thought the cutscenes were excellent, and especially on the new Resident Evil engine, it looks absolutely dynamite. And Capcom haven't let us down in recent years with their RE engine, and it doesn't look like they're going to anytime soon, so big props to them. They work really hard to make sure every texture, every detail looks phenomenal, and it really does show off, especially on an original Xbox One, which I played the game on. One other note that I'd want to say, without spoiling too much either, is I wish I could have had more Ethan in this game. While I felt like I knew him pretty well in Resident Evil 7, I wanted more of an extrapolation on that in Resident Evil 8, and I feel like they were there 50% of the time. They got there halfway, giving us an idea of what Ethan's life is like before Resident Evil 7 and after Resident Evil 7. But generally speaking, they don't go to the lengths that I'm used to them going to give him personality, to give him an idea of what he does for a living even. There's very little that they do to try to give us backstory before throwing him into another Resident Evil fiasco. And so that's really only how we know Ethan. is through his inner interpretations with the mold and just the Resident Evil viruses that exist. So I kind of wish they gave us more to go off of, and maybe they'll do that in future installments, just taking the ending of this game into account, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, guys, those are just a few of my thoughts. Altogether, I actually really like Resident Evil Village, despite some of its setbacks. As a fan, I'd probably have to rate it a 7 out of 10, but as just a general video game enthusiast, this is a solid 8 to 8.5 out of 10. I'd highly recommend you going out and buying it now. It's fully worth the $60, and it's just an absolute loads of fun. Just as a personal Resident Evil fan, I wish some of the lore and some of the revelations that they show in this game kind of held up to what I wanted from the franchise. That doesn't mean it's terrible, it's just not personally what I would have wanted to see the franchise go. I will note that there's also an extra mode you get once you beat the game for the first time called the Mercenaries mode. And this is a really fun mode and fun to play in arcade style, but they unfortunately hide a lot of unlockable content behind beating these levels and beating it on a certain percentage so you get a high enough score. For instance, you can unlock a lightsaber to use in the main story and campaign, but you can't do that unless you get an SS rank on all stages, all 8 stages of Mercenaries mode. It's a fun mode, but it's one of those things that I feel like people are just gonna give themselves rage if they completely go overboard with it and try to get a perfect score on it all the time. I think they need a little bit of improvement with Mercenaries, but it's a bonus mode, so I'm not holding it against them. Anyways, guys, I really hope that you guys give Resident Evil 8 a chance. I think it is worth your time. If you've played it or plan to play it, let me know down in the comments, and make sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, this is Ace signing off.